Chapter 9, Interpersonal Relationships. In this chapter, we'll look at stages that relationships may go through, and basically that's what we'll be focusing on for the most part. But a little bit about why we form relationships and types of relationships. What makes a relationship interpersonal is interdependency. And if you remember from Chapter 1 and probably our very first class period, we talked about the range of interpersonal relationships going from the very impersonal to the highly personal. But each of those relationships is still interdependent in some way and for some period of time. Basically, what interdependency means is that the actions of one person has consequences for the other person. Interdependency and interpersonal relationships, it has a lot of health benefits according to research. But there are also pressures to expose yourself. And, of course, the closer the relationship, the more possibility for hurtfulness. So there's always a balance between risk and reward in forming interpersonal relationships. Now, it's interesting to look at a relationship in this way. Those of you who are married or have here's a good example, marriage or a significant other romantic type of relationship, there are really many relationships in that one relationship, because let's take marriage for example. When you marry someone, you're actually forming a relationship with everyone else in their life. Think about it. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, but other people in that person's life are going to have some impact on you most of the time. We're going to talk about one way to look at relationships and how they develop. This is just one way to look at relationships, and it's fascinating to look at these 6 stages that a relationship may go through. We're not saying here that every relationship goes through each of these stages. And you'll see as we get further into these 6 stages how some relationships actually may never go into the last stage. But let's talk about each one of these 6 stages. Contact, involvement, intimacy, deterioration, repair, and dissolution. The stages can apply to all interpersonal relationships, whether it's a friendship, a love relationship, through any channel, face-to-face, computer-mediated. Remember, it's just a tool, one way to look at relationships. There are dynamic tensions that exist in every stage because we're human, of course. We feel emotions. We're all different. The first stage is the contact stage. This is when you first perceive the other person. You become aware of them. So the interactional contact might come first. Let's use the example of sitting down next to a person in a class, the first day of class. You don't know the person, but you become aware of them. They're sitting next to you. That's the contact stage. You might make an interaction with them. You might say, how do you decide on this class? Are you familiar with this instructor? That kind of thing. Now, if you want to go further into the contact stage, you might get to the point of invitational communication. Hey, do you mind if we trade phone numbers or trade, so we can text if I miss a class or you miss a class, we can give each other notes, that kind of thing. So there might, in the contact stage, there might be some interactional contact, and then what we call invitational communication. That's the first stage, the contact stage, perceiving the other person. There's the involvement stage. Now, not every relationship gets to this stage, but if it does, this is the stage where you learn a little bit about the person. You test the waters. What do you like to do? What program are you in here at JC? Oh, you want to be part of that study group? That kind of thing. Involvement stage. The third stage is the intimacy stage. This is where you each feel a little more comfortable with each other. You're a little more open. You'll disclose a little more of yourself, more personalized. Of course, this involves risk, as we've mentioned before. Disclosure involves risk. But there are two phases to this intimacy stage. There's the interpersonal commitment where you each recognize, okay, I like this person. We're going to hang out together a little bit. And there's the social bonding stage where other people recognize that you're friends, or that you hang out together, or that you spend a lot of time together, or you know each other, anything like that. So the social bonding is where the outside world sees that you have some relationship. So the intimacy stage, you're a little more comfortable with each other. Now, I'm going to introduce this term immediacy to you. Immediacy and displaying immediacy helps achieve that intimacy and that feeling of trust and openness with each other. It's actually the act of conveying a sense of interest and attention. It involves eye contact, expressing interest, asking questions, remembering things about the other person, that type of thing. That's immediacy. And it does help achieve some intimacy. I mean, I believe in the last chapter when we talked about conversation, we spoke about the fact that when you're trying to make a friend, if someone doesn't share something of themselves, it's very hard to get close to them. So immediacy is the type of communication where you convey an interest in the other person, a trust in them, you're open, that type of thing. Now, a relationship can enter a deterioration stage. And what this is a time when something changes. One of the people becomes a little dissatisfied, or maybe both of them do, or the reasons for coming together are no longer present. Now, we've got to make clear here, this deterioration stage can take place as a natural stage, as well as something that's might happen in an otherwise type of relationship that could go on and on. For instance, I've had lots of jobs where I make friends with the people on the job. But when I change jobs or when they change jobs, we hit a deterioration stage. The reasons for coming together no longer are present, and we lose contact. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's just a natural thing. Your reasons for coming together are no longer present. On the other hand, it can be a situation where someone becomes dissatisfied. Let's look at the two phases in the deterioration stage. So first there's intrapersonal dissatisfaction, and intrapersonal refers to within the person. So one of the people in the relationship's thinking, I don't like the fact that he doesn't call me as much as he used to, or he's not as attentive. I'm just giving examples. They're thinking, I'm not real happy with this. And then the second phase is the interpersonal deterioration. And the person who's unhappy expresses it to the other person. This is a good place to recognize that all relationships are held together by either desire, obligation, necessity, or some combination of these three. Think about all the relationships you've had in your life. You were either brought together with the other person through your desire to have that relationship, the obligation to have the relationship, or you just had to out of necessity, or some combination of those. So let's think about your roommate. Your roommate in the dorm. It's a necessity, right? You have to share a dorm room with someone. Okay. How about what if you have a cousin? You're not particularly crazy about this cousin. You probably wouldn't have gone after them as a friend if they weren't your cousin. But holiday time, your mom says, "Hey, I'm having your cousins over. We're all going to sit down at the table together, and I expect you to be there." It's an obligation to have that relationship with that cousin, even though you may not have gone out of your way to form that relationship if you didn't have the obligation to do it during the holidays at your mom's house. And then, of course, there's a desire. Oh, I want to get to know this person. I think they're really cool. We have a lot in common. So every relationship is held together by one of those or any combination of these three. Okay, so you hit a deterioration stage. Something has changed. Someone isn't happy, or maybe neither person is happy for whatever reason. Then we can go into the repair stage. The repair stage, the intrapersonal repair, is where you're thinking, oh, let's see, what can I do about this? And the interpersonal repair is when you actually talk to the other person about it. Here's a nice little acronym. We use the letters in repair to look at the steps involved in attempting to repair a relationship. The first thing that needs to be done is recognizing the problem. Will this relationship ever be repaired if only one person recognizes the problem? Probably not. Both people have to recognize that there's a problem. Or at the very least, the other person who doesn't bring the problem up has to recognize that the first person has a problem with what's going on. So both people have to recognize the problem to some extent. And they have to engage in some kind of productive conflict resolution, talking about it, deciding what's, thinking about what's going on, aren't they happy about, that kind of thing. Posing possible solutions. Okay, well, let's try this. Affirming each other. I'm committed to this relationship. I want to be friends with you. I want to stay together. We want to do this. We want to try this. Integrate the solutions into normal behavior. Okay, let's give it a go. Let's see if it works and actually do it. Carry through. And then what's the risk in that? It may not work, right? And you might have to go back to square one and try something else. There's always a risk. Now, if you can't repair, try as you might, and remember both sides have to be willing to repair. But if it doesn't work, then the relationship is dissolved. It's the cutting of bonds. And there's two phases here, too. There's the agreement between the parties involved, the interpersonal separation. And of course, that's hard enough for both parties to accept the separation. But then there's the social or the public celebration too, separation too, which can sometimes be even tougher because that's the outside world seeing, oh, they've broken up. Wow. And that can be tough. Anyone who's ever taken a boyfriend or girlfriend to their family's house for the holidays and then The next year you break up with this significant other, and the following holiday you go by yourself, and it can be a tough situation if people bring up, oh, where's so and so. So that social separation you have to live through too.